The first text structure that we're going to discuss is chronological order. This is also known as sometimes being in sequence. Basically, this tells time from one point to another, and it is very common to be seen in expository writing. The easiest way to recognize a chronological text structure is by examining the transition words. There are a few common words that are used. These usually refer to order, such as first, next, last, second, finally, then, and dates and times are commonly used. The goal that the author is trying to do is to tell the order of events in which they happened. These transition words allow the reader to identify when one event has moved on to the next event. Let's look at an example of a chronological essay. This article is about the Rwanda genocide. The first thing you do when reading an essay is try to discover the main idea. So in the first paragraph, beginning on April 6, 1994, Hutus began slaughtering the Tutsis in the African country of Rwanda. As the brutal killings continued, the world stood idly by and just watched the slaughter. Lasting 100 days, the Rwanda genocide left approximately 100 Tutsis and Hutu sympathizers dead. Now, the author never states that this will be about a chronological essay, but they do provide us with some clues. For example, we have to find the main idea. So, what do we know? That there's a date that it starts off with. There was brutal killings. And after lasting 100 days, 100,000 Tutsis and Hutu sympathizers were dead. So what would the main idea of this article be? That's correct. The Rwanda genocide. Now, how do we know it's listed in a chronological order? That's where your transition words come into play. We have the date right there. And then the paragraphs are organized. So let's go down to the next paragraph. The Hutu and the Tutsis are people who share a common past. When Rwanda was settled, the people who lived there raised cattle. Soon the people who owned the most cattle were called Tutsi, and everyone else was called Hutu. At this time, a person could easily change categories through marriage or cattle acquisition. It wasn't until Europeans came to colonize the area that the terms Tutsi and Hutu took on a racial role. So here, we have pre-European history. In the next paragraph, it gives us clues about after post-European history. And there are transition words that give us clues that this is a chronological essay. It wasn't until, thus they put the Tutsis in role of responsibility. In the next paragraphs, there are further clues that this is a chronological essay. When the Germans lost their colonies following World War I, the Belgians took control over Rwanda. In 1933, the Belgians solidified the category of Tutsi and Hutu by mandating that every person was to have an identity card that labeled them either Tutsi, Hutu, or Twa. So what transition words do we see in this paragraph that indicate a chronological essay? Well, we have the word when. We have the date in 1933. And then it just goes through and it describes the events that happened after Germans lost control of the colony and the Belgians took over. Notice that each paragraph really describes a separate event as it occurs. So this paragraph, this paragraph, this paragraph, and this paragraph all highlight a different event in the chronological order. And they all use those transition words. Although the Tutsi constituted only about 10% of Rwanda's population and the Hutu nearly 90%, the Belgians gave Tutsi all the leadership positions. This upset the Hutu. Notice the next paragraph. It starts off with a transition word. When Rwanda struggled for independence, the Belgians switched the status of the two groups. The animosity lasted for decades. Also notice that this article uses headings. Who are the Hutsi and the Tutsi? Down below, the events that sparkled the genocide. And then finally, the 100 Days of Slaughter. These also tell you that this is a chronological essay. Authors use headings to tell you what this paragraph is about. Or section. So the events that sparked the genocide and the 100 Days of Slaughter, we know in the next section, this will be about leading up to the slaughter. The next heading tells us that the article will be about the 100 Days of Slaughter. Let's look again for common transition words. At 8:30 p.m. at April 6, 1994, so we have a date. The president of Rwanda was retiring from a summit in Tanzania when a surface-to-air missile shot his plane out of the sky over Rwanda's capital city of Kigali. All on board were killed in the crash. Since 1993, both since and the date, President Habyarimana, a Hutu, had run a totalitarian regime in Rwanda, which had excluded all Tutsis from participating. This changed on August 3, 1993, when Habyarimana signed the Arusha Accords, which weakened the Hutu hold on Rwanda and allowed Tutsis to participate in the government. This greatly upset Hutu extremists. Although, there's a transition word, it has never been determined who is truly responsible for the assassination. Hutu extremists profited the most from Habyarimana's death. Within 24 hours after the crash, so there's a timeline, within 24 hours, Hutu extremists had taken over the government, blamed the Tutsis for the assassination, and begun the slaughter. Once again, each paragraph described a different event in chronological order. Then we move down to the next section. We have another heading. So in the last paragraph, this paragraph, this paragraph, and this paragraph all coincided with this heading. Each paragraph, while separate events, described what led up to the genocide. So in this next section, the 100 Days of Slaughters, each paragraph will describe a different event, but each one will describe the 100 Days of Slaughters. This one, this one. So let's look for transition words. Take some time, read the paragraphs to yourself, and identify some transition words. Did you find the words such as began? Over the next few days and weeks? On April 7th? When? And then over the last one, over the next several days and weeks. So that is how you would read a chronological essay. First, identify the main ideas. Notice that the events go from time A to time B. And look for those common transition words. First, next, last, when, then, second, and finally. And know that authors often group items by event. Thank you.